No country, no community is able to solve the complex problems of our world alone. We need to come together, not only to talk, but to listen. It is absolutely essential that you all join the conversation. We need your opinions, your strategies, your ideas for us to be able to deliver better for the people of the world that we must serve.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yuhanna Edwards, and I'm the proud president of the UNA USA Westchester chapter. On behalf of our organization and a hardworking team who helped plan today's virtual consultation, welcome. 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and today is a community consultation on the future of the United Nations. 75 years ago, the United Nations was formed with specific reasons in mind to get the world to work together. Decades later, the United Nations continued to help build the better world its founders envisioned, even during global crisis. As we look to the United Nations centennial milestone 25 years from now, where do we go from here? Today's convening is part of the Global One with significant subtitle, Shaping Our Future Together. We, UNA Westchester, UNA Bronx, UNA Southern New York, and UNA Southwest Connecticut chapters are working together to have its important conversation, which is jointly being done nationwide. Your input is encouraged, very much needed. Collectively, we must dictate how we direct our future and the future of the world. Where do we go from here? And what kind of future do we want to create? Were two of the questions included in the promotion of today's event. Did you reflect on these questions? Our goal should be to get our local communities to adopt 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs. That apply to our community. The SDGs are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for us all. They address the global challenges we face, including those related to poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and justice. The 17 goals are all interconnected in order to leave no one behind. It is important that we achieve them. I committed to this for my 5 grandchildren, their grandchildren, and their grandchildren. UNA USA is mandated to assist in seeking that the United Nations' next 25 years remain impactful, but we cannot do it alone. Today is your chance to provide direct input to the United Nations on building a brighter future through the lens of our community. Our voices will weigh in on UN priorities to build the future we want. All we are is a collection of nations, and without each other in the long run, we will perish. A world divided will not last for 75 more years. Please take this opportunity to enthusiastically engage. Let your voice be heard in support of the future you want for yourself and future generations. There will be real-time polling to engage you about global trends, bridging the gap between where we are, where we want to be, and charting the course for the United Nations Foundation and UNA leaders. In my sincere hope that you find today's session engaging and informative. Thank you in advance to US Congressman Eliot Engel, Westchester County Executive George Latimer, and Peter Yo, President of the Better World Campaign and Senior Vice President of the United Nations Foundation, and the UNA USA leaders for your participation. And again, thank you all for attending. Enjoy the session. Please remember that the consultation will be followed by the UNA Westchester's annual meeting. Although it is mainly targeted at members of the UNA USA Westchester chapter, all are certainly welcome. It is my pleasure to now introduce Troy Wolfe, Senior Director, Partnership and Special Initiatives at the United Nations Foundation.
Thank you, Yuhanna.
Thank you
very much. And welcome everyone once again to the UNA Westchester, UNA Bronx, UNA Southwest Connecticut, and UNA Southern New York State Division UN75 Consultation. To mark the 75th anniversary in 2020, the United Nations is hosting the largest global conversation to work towards a better world for everyone, everywhere. The United Nations Association of the United States of America is contributing to this endeavor by hosting consultations in all 50 states. From addressing the climate crisis to advancing human rights, the UN wants to hear from you about your hopes for the future. It's important to note that the UN continues to implement and scale up activities on the future we want, while being responsive to the rapidly changing situation in different parts of the world due to COVID-19 and other challenges. The overarching aim of UN75 is to reinvigorate support for global cooperation. This pandemic is a reminder of how important it is that we work together across borders, sectors, and generations. We hope that today's global consultation facilitates an honest dialogue about our future and how the UN can best equip individuals and communities to address the current challenges that our world faces. Your participation in today's consultation is instrumental, and the feedback that we receive from you will help shape the future of our planet and the work of the United Nations. To get us started, I'd like to play a short video for you from the Westchester County Executive, George Latimer.
I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. 75 years ago, the United Nations was formed in the aftermath of World War II as an institution of hope that people from all across the globe could find a way to work together cooperatively and to find peaceful solutions to the problems that plague us all. The world is still a very difficult place to function in, and some of the problems still plague us today that plagued us then. But we know that the United Nations is an important institution. It provides an important forum for people to discuss those issues. And even when there's robust debate, there's always a hope for a dialogue that leads to solution. Congratulations on 75 years. We look forward to the dialogue that frames the United Nations for the next 25 years. I'm George.
As our special guest today, we have with us Peter Yo, President of the Better World Campaign and Senior Vice President for the United Nations Foundation, Congressman Eliot Engel, Chairman, House Foreign Affairs Committee, and Marcia Brewster, Vice President and Program Chair, the United Nations Association of the United States of America, Westchester Chapter. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Peter Yo. As President of the Better World Campaign and Senior Vice President of the United Nations Foundation, Peter Yo leads the Foundation's strategic engagement with Congress and administration to advance policy challenges that support the UN's work for global progress. He was at the forefront of efforts to forge a strategic alliance between the Foundation and UNA USA to create the largest network of UN supporters across the United States. Yo joined the United Nations Foundation in the Better World Campaign after 2 decades of work on Capitol Hill, where he shepherded legislation to authorize the PEPFAR program to combat HIV/AIDS and the United States Department of State. Please welcome Peter Yo.
Well, thanks, Troy, for introducing me, and thank you, Yuhanna, for your leadership of the chapter. We appreciate it. It's a great pleasure to be with you today as you conduct your consultations in celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. These consultations are happening around the country and around the world, in refugee camps, in small towns and villages, and in big cities. So you're part of a very large dialogue today. Let me also thank all the other chapters who are joined with UNA Westchester in sponsoring today's consultation. We very much appreciate your long-standing work on behalf of a strong American relationship with the United Nations and active American engagement throughout the world. I hope that you and your families are doing well in this challenging period of global pandemic and economic challenge and recent instability caused by endemic racism and police violence. What's happening in the world, in the country today, it's a reminder of our interconnectedness and the absolute necessity of working together to tackle global challenges. The UN system is set up for that purpose, whether it's the UN's World Health Organization that is actually coordinating the global response to COVID-19, to UN peacekeepers that are resolving conflicts in countries and regions, that could threaten American and global security, to the UN Refugee Agency, and to the quiet work of UN diplomats, many based in New York, that are working to bring parties together to resolve conflict and to negotiate important agreements. That's exactly what the founders of the UN, led by the US, expected out of the organization when they crafted it 75 years ago. So we're going to take the results of today's consultations in all 50 states, bundle them together, and make sure that the Secretary General and his team, US government officials, and your elected representatives are briefed on what's happening, and that they are presented by the Secretary General to world leaders in a special session in September. It's now my great pleasure to introduce, well, we're going to hold on 1 second before I introduce Congressman Engel, and I will turn it back to Marcia, and then I will introduce Representative Engel because he needs a few more minutes to get on this meeting. So Marcia, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, Troy and Yuhanna. It's great to have this consultation today, and I know that Congressman Engel will be here in a few minutes. I'm pleased to recognize some of the outstanding local elected officials who are participating with us today, including State Senator Shelley Meyer, Mayor Sean Patterson Howard of Mount Vernon, County Legislator Mary Jane Shimsky, as well as our partners, Professors Michiko Kuroda and Sheila Gersh of Mercy College, and our partners such as many members of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, as well as the Links Incorporated. I also wanted to acknowledge that among our participants are a number of my former colleagues from the United Nations, and I'm very happy to have them here. At this juncture, I wanted to mention how UNA USA has transitioned to an online platform after having to cancel its main national events, main national public events in 2020. That would be the Global Engagement Summit and the Global Leadership Summit, which was planned for Washington. The Engagement Summit was at the General Assembly at UN headquarters. And the Leadership Summit was going to be in Washington in June. Chapters all over the country had to convert their consultations on the 50th anniversary of the UN, 75th anniversary of the UN, into a virtual platform, such as our event today. Yes, Robina, leave that one. As you can see from the slide, Westchester and the Southwest Connecticut chapters are offering a number of targeted, more focused virtual meetings on topics of major interest to our constituents. These will be held throughout the rest of the year. At the national level, we have been holding weekly or semi-weekly webinars as part of the Global Engagement Online series. And by the way, these are really excellent. They highlight experts and leaders from the United Nations agencies on topics of major interest to all of us. And you can view the ones that have already been held in the past. And the Southern New York State Division, you can see right there in the middle, on June 11th, will be having its Mid-Atlantic Global Consultation, which will be similar to this one, but for the whole Mid-Atlantic region, which includes New Jersey. We look forward to meeting together in person as soon as it is safe. But in the meantime, these virtual consultations on Zoom are all right, and we're benefiting from them very much. So I hope you can join us in some of these. Now, let me see, is Congressman Engel with us yet or not?
I think so.
Congressman Engel. I believe Peter is going to introduce you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it's hold on. My great pleasure to introduce Eliot Engel, who represents the Bronx and Westchester in the House of Representatives. Now, many of you know Representative Engel as your congressman, and you are indeed very fortunate. But I got to know Representative Engel when I was the Deputy Staff Director of the Foreign Affairs Committee and was working very closely with his team on so many important pieces of legislation. He is now chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and doing an exceptional job promoting American and global interests. Just over the last few days, he's launched an investigation into the firing of the Inspector General at the State Department. He's stood up for LGBTQ plus people everywhere. He's criticized the new USAID advisor who has a strong and disturbing anti-Israel record. And on the UN, he has led the charge year after year in support of UN peacekeeping, and he is playing a very instrumental role in ensuring that we continue to fund the UN's World Health Organization. It is my great pleasure to introduce Congressman Eliot Engel.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be able to communicate this way. You'll notice that I haven't gotten a haircut in God knows how many weeks. So if for no other reason, I hope this all ends soon. Unless I can talk my wife into doing it. Not sure. It's always a pleasure to be with you, with Peter, Yuhanna, and the entire UNA community. And as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I've always believed that the United Nations is a critical instrument in addressing many of our greatest global challenges. And right now, there's no shortage of challenges facing the world. You know, when I was a little boy growing up in the Bronx, going to public schools would always take us on a trip to the United Nations. And I always thought, wow, imagine one day maybe I could come back here. And when I was able to speak to the United Nations a few years ago, I remember walking in and thinking, well, it finally happened. I've always been in awe of the UN, even when it does things with which I disagree, because I think the UN is our best hope for peace. So again, there's no shortages of challenges facing the world: an unprecedented pandemic, refugee crisis, threats to human rights, climate change. These are trying times. And as all of us here know, it's at times like this when we most need to come together as a global community, work with our allies, our partners, and friends around the world, and find coordinated solutions to these problems that affect us all. Because even as the most powerful country in the world, we can accomplish a great deal more when we partner with other countries than when we go it alone. When we decide American leadership and American power are needed to right a wrong, it's easier to share that burden with like-minded governments, and that's what multilateralism is all about. The UN is a forum that makes that sort of work much, much easier. There are UN members we don't particularly agree with most of the time, absolutely. But there are also many countries that share our views, and by working together through the UN, the world body becomes a vital tool to address some of our greatest global challenges. Take the current coronavirus pandemic. Viruses don't respect borders, and this one has reached into our community right here in New York. We cannot tackle this problem alone. But instead of working with other countries to solve this global challenge, unfortunately, President Trump has pulled American leadership from the world stage. At every opportunity, the administration has tried to shift blame for mismanaging the crisis here at home by vilifying international organizations and pulling our country from the very institutions most needed to meet this challenge. The president's decision to pull out of the World Health Organization, in my opinion, is a catastrophic mistake. Cutting off ties with the WHO in the midst of a global pandemic is like shutting off the fire hydrants in the middle of a blaze. If we want the WHO to do a better job, and there's always room for better jobs, then we need to engage more and work to improve it, not bury our heads in the sand. I led my Democratic colleagues on the Foreign Affairs Committee in a public push urging Trump to continue funding to the WHO and its partner, the Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, as it's called in the Americas. PAHO is a perfect example of the life-saving work alone done by UN agencies. It's a critical partner in supporting the Venezuelan people, in the face of a humanitarian nightmare. Last year, PAHO's measles vaccination campaign reached nearly 9 million Venezuelan children. I was in Venezuela last year. It reduced measles cases by more than 90%. And look at the UN's work on the global refugee crisis. The number of displaced people around the world is at an all-time high, an absolutely devastating humanitarian disaster. And while this administration has shut our nation's doors in the most cruel manner, capping our refugee admissions at a record low, UNHCR is doing life-saving work every day to support millions of refugees and provide assistance to the communities hosting them. From Venezuelans to Colombia, to Syrians in Jordan, to Rohingya in Bangladesh. While multinational institutions are far from perfect, they enable us to bring together the global community and leverage the collective strength of our partners, allies, and other countries toward a common goal. The UN should be a place where moral clarity prevails, but not every government subscribes to that view, and instead the mechanisms of the UN are exploited by some members to embarrass others. This problem is particularly acute when it comes to the way Israel is treated in the UN. Criticism of any government is fair game, certainly including the United States and including Israel and every other country. But why does anti-Israel bias matter? Because there are so many other hotspots in the world that deserve the UN's attention, and as I've said, would likely benefit from the good work the UN does. The more time the UN spends on Israel, the less time it spends dealing with human rights violators such as China, Venezuela, Syria, Iran, North Korea, or Zimbabwe. The citizens suffering in these countries deserve better. I offer this criticism in the hope that American leadership will help to deal with this problem in the years ahead, not as an argument to walk away from this organization. I could go on and on about the good work that the UN does, down to very specific examples, like the Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, which we call CICIG. That has done incredible work to root out corruption in that country, in Guatemala. There are scores of more examples of success like this one. But as we all know, foreign policy issues are very seldom black and white. We have to work with countries we disagree with on certain things. We're far better off working in imperfect multilateral organizations and allow us to build coalitions and find solutions to global challenges. And we should use American leadership rooted in American values to push for the changes we want to see. That's why this conversation today is so important, and it comes at such a pivotal time. We want to look ahead to the future for the United Nations, to the next 25 years, and do what we can to ensure the US continues to play a leadership role. The coronavirus crisis has shown clearly just how much we need to comment to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. The ripple effects of COVID-19 around the world are putting at risk the hard-won gains on the SDGs, especially in developing countries. School closures mean fewer education opportunities. Fragile healthcare systems battling COVID-19 are under increasing strain, which risks leaving women and girls even more vulnerable, and farmers and other small businesses in weak economies are struggling. And the pandemic has emboldened undemocratic actors to take advantage of the situation, clamping down on press freedoms and consolidating power at the expense of civil society. We must ensure that we tackle COVID-19 head on by responding to the immediate crisis, but also ensuring we don't backslide on the remarkable progress already made. That's where all of you come in. Civil society organizations like the United Nations Association are the real change makers in this fight, both here at home and around the world. pressing for change in the face of repressive regimes, poverty, and instability. It's advocates like you who can further the UN's efforts and push for the change you want to see in the world. I'm honored to be your ally in Congress. I'm honored to be chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm honored to work with you because I applaud your work. So I am your ally leading the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm humbled every day by the work you're doing. Please keep it up. Thank you so much. My pleasure to speak with you today. Have a good day.
Thank you, Congressman Engel.
Thank you.
And now, to continue the excitement, during this segment, we will conduct polls and solicit your input via the chat window. To move us through the sequence, we are joined today by Dan Bena, Marsha Brewster, Raina Cadaville, Alex Anvari, Patrick Sciarrata, and Paul Prezendu. Before turning it over to Dan, I wanted to go over a few elements of Zoom so that everyone is familiar with the platform. I also wanted to remind everyone that this is being recorded. First, we have everyone on mute. Once we get to the discussion portion, you will be invited to place your comments into the chat and vote using the polling feature. The facilitators will support each other and monitor the chat feature for an interactive discussion. Lastly, I wanted to say that we have a short time together today, and we want to make sure that everyone has their voice. So please be respectful and open to others' opinions as we work through the consultation. It will be very exciting to see all the perspectives represented today. To get us started, I'll now turn it over to Dan. Dan?
Thank you, Troy. Thanks everyone for participating, and just a couple of minutes worth of discussion to set the context for what is going to be coming for the rest of this meeting. In a couple of minutes, we're going to put all of you to work as attendees, so that's where you're going to really be using your voice. But to set the context, you heard President Edwards mention the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. You heard His Honor Congressman Engel mention the SDGs. And we're suggesting that the SDGs present a terrific framework for your thoughts and for your consideration as you think about the future that you want for yourselves and for your kids and for your kids' kids. 17 goals are the SDGs. They were agreed in 2015. And what's so great about the SDGs? What's so noteworthy about the SDGs? Well, for the first thing, I want you to think about the last time that you've had 10 of your friends or 10 of your family members, maybe from different ethnic backgrounds or different countries or different geographies or different religions. Think about when you've had 10 people that you know agree on something. You might not be able to think about that because it's pretty tough to get people to agree. Well, in 2015, 193 countries agreed to the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals. That's remarkable. I can't remember a time in history when all member states of the United Nations thought enough of a single goal, a single mission to agree, and they did on the SDGs. The other reason they're important is they're with us for the next 10 years. So whether you're a student that's just graduating and entering the workforce, whether you're a head of state, whether you're a government leader, whether you're an academic or a not-for-profit leader, these are with you for the next 10 years. And as you look at this slide, there is literally something for everyone. Whether you're passionate about ending hunger or renewable energy or life below oceans or water stewardship or gender equity, there is something for everyone. And I like to call these the gift from the UN to humanity, because there is literally something for everyone through which we can move forward toward the future we want. And with that, I'm going to toss it back over to Troy, and you're going to start doing the work, and we're going to tease out some of those questions about the future that all of you want for us collectively. Troy, over to you.
Dan, thank you so much for those framing comments. And it's certainly important when we look at the 17 goals. It's an integrated framework and great for the purposes of what convenes us today. We're now going to start our conversation, and we would love to know where everyone is from today. So please go ahead and type your responses in the chat box. You see 2 questions on your screen. In what town or city do you reside? Let's go with that one first. I would love to monitor the chat and just kind of see where we have people represented. We've got Mount Vernon, New York, welcome. Stamford, Connecticut, Yonkers, whoa, it's going very fast. New Rochelle, Richfield, Connecticut, the Bronx, Mamaroneck, Mount Kisco, Hastings-on-Hudson. This is great. The Bronx is fully represented. White Plains, Hastings-on-Hudson, Mexico City, welcome Mexico. Westport, Connecticut, Dobbs Ferry, New York, Staten Island, the Bronx, Tarrytown, Manhattan. We've got cross-representation. This is excellent. Another one from Yonkers. We've got Queens in the house, Charlotte, North Carolina, Cortland Manor, Westport, Connecticut. We've got great, Kuwait. This is excellent. This is excellent. Queens, Pleasantville, just gonna go back here. It came in very, very fast. That was awesome. Mexico City, we already said. Hastings, Port Chester, New York. I think I already got Mount Kisco. Ridgefield, Connecticut. New City, New York. Wonder if that's New York City. Stamford, Connecticut. This is excellent. We've got cross-representation, which is gonna make Croton-on-Hudson, Vermont, Rye, New York, Westport. Excellent. Welcome all. I'm gonna ask now, if you look at the next question, what is the one word that you would use to describe the United Nations? When you think about the framework that Dan just showed us and the work and the history of the United Nations Foundation, what is the one word that you would use to describe? Essential, vital, equitable, reinvented, global, critical, superb, versatile, promising, hope, multilateralism, peace, aspirational, anchor, compromise, necessary, global peace, solidarity, peacekeeping, stewardship, collaboration, inclusive dialogue, commonality. These are all very excellent choices. Vision. So we're going to move on to the next screen. We've got hope there. And now for the moment that we've all been waiting for. Virtual drum roll, please. During today's global consultation, we will address 3 main question groups. What kind of future do we want to create? Are we on track to secure a better world? And what action is needed to help us achieve a brighter future? To take us through the next segment, I will now turn it over to my colleague, Marcia Brewster. Marcia?
Thank you, Troy. Now, our first question is to think about, please, what kind of future do we want to create? And in order to do this, we're going to have a poll, and you'll have a number of options to choose from. And we want to consider whether your children and grandchildren will have fewer or more opportunities than you had. You know, whether they'll be better or worse off than you are, what kind of education, health, and job prospects they'll have. Do you think that you and the next generation will be more or less mobile, socially, economically, and physically? Do you expect to live in a more or less healthy, natural environment? How might the environment be different? Can we move to the next slide? And here is poll question number 1. If you picture the world you want to see in 25 years, what 3 things would you most want to see? And here is the poll right here, and you can vote on 3 of them: less conflict, better access to healthcare, human rights, environment, education, international migration, employment, and there are 2 more at the bottom: greater collaboration among countries and equal opportunity for women and men. And that poll, the results of that poll, you have 90 seconds, by the way, to make your choices, 90 seconds. And then as soon as we complete that 90 seconds, we'll see what the results are. It comes up automatically. please click right inside the poll. Robina, I don't know if the poll is still there. It's not on my screen anymore.
Yeah, Marcia, it's still going. We can end polling now.
Okay. So here we go. Look at that. That's wonderful. So a lot of things are very close here. More respect for human rights got the top score. More respect for human rights. Well, that's very relevant right now. Environmental protection, less conflict. Less conflict is second. Environmental protection, education, and healthcare are all right up there. Well, these are the priorities for the future, and a lot of what we'll be doing over the course of the next year will be related to those topics. So let's go to the next one. So overall, do you feel that people in 2045, that's when the UN will be 100 years old, will be better off, worse off, or the same as today? You can go ahead and give your response in the polling. I think that one we only have like 20 seconds. Well, we have a group of optimists in the room. 43%, well, it's not more than 50. 43% of you feel that we will be better off in 25 years. And I hope that's the case. And I hope that the UN can help us get to that goal. We'll have to go through all of those top priorities and make sure that we are able to succeed in improving our situation. Now, I would like to pass the floor to Raina Cadaville to present the next question.
Hi, everyone. For this next section, let's consider whether or not we're on track to achieve that ideal world that we want and that we just talked about. So as we're thinking about this question, let's think about what it means to be on track for these goals, given the recent shifts we've had to make because of COVID, but also given the empowerment and momentum we've seen with the Decade of Action and the SDGs. Think about the leaders and institutions in our world today, how they interact, and the goals that they're setting for us and for our planet. That said, let's open up the poll. This question's pretty straightforward. Are we on track? Yes, no, or are you not quite sure? We'll give you a few seconds to enter your vote on the screen. And I think this one is going to be about 20 as well. I see a lot of no's building here. All right, the poll has ended, and thank you for voting. I see a little bit of pessimism here, but that just means that we have a lot of work to do, especially with the United Nations, and I think we're ready for this. Regardless of how you voted, think about what still needs to be accomplished to achieve that world we want, and how you can be a part of these goals and those solutions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alex Zanbari for our next question. Alex?
Thank you, Raina. The UN has programs and organizations that are aligned with those trends that you see on the next slide. What are your thoughts about the UN's areas to focus on? Which trends are the most impactful on the future that you want? Select 3. We'll review the results in about 90 seconds. I saw these already, so I know which 3 I'm picking. Think about the importance of protecting the environment. Think about fair and just societies trending in measures of inequality. How do new technologies impact the future? What are you thinking about population changes will affect the world that you want to achieve? Global health and well-being, is that at the center of your vision? How about education? So it looks like we have about 55 respondents so far. We'll give it another 10, 20 seconds to go. Let's go for big participation numbers. Well, looks like climate change is leading the pack, as anticipated. Access to healthcare a close second. Poverty and inequality. Okay, so we can publish the poll results. So in anticipation of how we view global environmental issues, we are looking at a deeper dive global consultation with the Southwest Connecticut chapter of the UNA and partnering with the UNA Westchester mid-July. Please stay in touch with us and we'll get more information to you about that. So now we have a chat opportunity. I'm going to ask you all to think about the one piece of advice, well, make it two if you like, but succinctly. What would you advise UN Secretary General and the member states in terms of specific action that addresses the global trends affecting the future that you want? Chat away. Okay, so they're rolling in. We're seeing rejoining WHO. We're seeing bringing the world together, thank you. Peacekeeping in the UN. Coming together in unity to solve the global crisis, thank you, Eric. Bruce pointing out that without fixing climate change, humans won't be here anymore. Patrick, thank you. Bringing the world together. There's too much nationalism causing distance. Keep the US and the WHO. So these are all good advice. From Sheila, thank you. Global respect for each other. And from Humphrey to the Secretary General, lead to the extent that you can. George, pay more attention to the media and social networks to better carry your messages. And Diane, for technology, learn about it, embrace it, use it. From Nicole, put young people in positions of power related to the climate crisis and do everything possible to enact change that will directly impact global emissions. Thank you, Nicole. From Olivia, it is important to maintain idealism about what we want from the future, but we must also apply realistic qualities to our initiatives. Joan, strengthen the WHO, very timely. And at the end, you will have an opportunity to add your voice to a specific petition from the UNA USA about the WHO funding. From Sean, we must tap into the passion of our youth and young professionals who are not engaged in the US. Humphrey wants all the member states to work better together. And Joe Baxter, I would like the Secretary General to be more proactive and take positions with more publicity. So there's about 27 more messages. We've turned them on and we will publish these. I hope that you'll follow along with the follow-up activities on behalf of the Southwest Connecticut chapter. Thank you very much. And at this point, I want to hand the microphone on to Patrick. Patrick is going to take us into section 3.
Thank you very much, Alex. I don't know if I'm on yet. I think Alex is still with us.
Patrick, you're on.
Thank you so much. Rabina. Thank you everyone for being with us today. I think we've just started this chat in a very strong and good way. Now I think we can get further involved in the chat by answering some further questions. What is that we need to do to bridge the gap between where we are right now and where we'd like to be? What actions, rather than just discussion, is important for us at this point? So what forms of action and collaboration are needed from our elected officials and community leaders to bridge the gap between where we are today and the future that we seek? So once again, I'm going to ask you to type in your response, be as succinct as possible, because as you know, there are many people on the line right now, and we would like to take a look at them all. I'll ask my colleague and friend Dan Benna to help and take a look as we're moving forward. And why don't you start now? What forms of action and collaboration are needed from our elected officials and community leaders to bridge the gap from where we are today to the future we want in, let's say, the next 25 years? There's one, a very good one. Bring the youth into the question and include them into the discussion. I would, maybe as not a youth, I would say let's also think about being intergenerational. Understanding of globalization. Judy is saying more involvement. Boy, they're rolling by quickly. Dan, if you could take note of some, maybe we'll come back to these later, but more uniting internationally, certainly. Promoting accountability, very, very important point. Leaders who are open-minded and finally understand the mission, the goals and the vision of the United Nations. More direct service is needed. Maybe we also need to learn about the incredible amount of service that the UN is providing at this time. Community outreach, economies of scale, more cooperation, especially in the financial, technical areas between and among countries, starting with accomplishments, improve the connectivity between countries regardless of rich and poor, which is a real mainstay of the United Nations. Dan, did you see any that you wanted to point out?
I did, Patrick. There was one from Humphrey that was particularly timely. If there's something that you don't like, don't leave. So, you know, stay the course and figure out solutions to some of the more challenging problems. And then we are seeing a couple that are focusing, as with previous questions, on bringing in the voice of youth and the action and influence and power of youth.
I thank Jonathan Maxwell for saying support the free press. This is a really important moment for media and the press. There's also a part of the United Nations UNESCO that's running MilClicks, which is looking for media and information literacy. You may want to look up MilClicks on Facebook to look at freedom of the press and fact-finding in the press. Policies that empower people, greater respect for humanitarian needs.
And Patrick, Colleen brought up a good point, which is conflict resolution beginning in childhood, teaching kids the skills that they need to succeed over the next 25, 50, 75 years.
Nicole brings up a great point to putting more women in position of power. If you look at the countries that are doing the best under COVID, they're all led by women. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Continue to educate our youth to become future ambassadors on the mission of the UN and its cooperation for peace. Thank you, Dimitris. That's a great comment too.
And Patrick, we're seeing quite a few focus on accountability, focusing on accountability and increasing accountability.
So let's move on, because these are all going to be recorded and kept. But there's another group that I'd like your opinion on, and those are businesses and non-governmental organizations. Now, you've looked at all those people who have the formal power, but we all know that businesses have central power through their constituents who are that merchant-client relationship that they have. What can we see from them to bridge the gap between where we are today and the future we want? And NGOs, which we used to call nonprofit organizations, what's their role in ensuring that the next 25 years bring us the future that we want. Remember to be succinct. You can tell Dan and I are trying to read these as quickly as we can, but please start now and look now, not at your elected officials in the United Nations leadership and staff, but businesses and NGOs. What's your suggestions there? Closing the pay gap between men and women, very important. Definitely, Eric is mentioning that NGOs get to the people on the grassroots level, the ground floor. So maybe they need to do even more of that. Forward things, social responsibility, long-term vision from Christina in Mexico City. Thank
Dr.
you,
Gersh
Christina.
is saying to create joint programs to benefit education. So there's great opportunity to involve academia with the private sector and with the not-for-profit world.
Nicole's reminding us that we have to remember that NGOs are going to be struggling for funding through these tough economic times, and to keep that in mind with your support. Gender equality comes up again from Jonathan.
So does accountability again, Patrick, accountability for businesses to be held accountable for the things that they do.
And as we run an NGO, it's wonderful having Ambassador Vaughn with us, writing that we need to provide financial support to the NGOs, especially in the field, in the developing countries. Well, okay, as these are coming in, I think the next question becomes quite obvious, but I would really like Paul to share it with you. And let me bring on my colleague on the board, another colleague, Paul Presendieu, and ask him to take us to the next slide. Paul?
I'm here. Hello, everyone. Is everyone able to see me? Okay. So for right now, we're going to be talking about what are actions that we as individuals can take to bridge the gap between where we are today and the future we want to have. For my position with the United Nations Association as young professional chairman, it allows me to engage with young members of our county community and connect their local projects to global initiatives or global sustainable development goals. This includes a student at Westchester Community College named Peter Singh, who's able to create a community garden at his college campus and donate 20 pounds of grown vegetables to Feeding Westchester to help combat zero hunger, which is our second sustainable development goal. Or a senior at Mamaroneck High School in Andrew Basta, who was able to help found a local chapter of the Sunrise Movement and mobilize high school students that aren't even able to vote yet to help support national environmental policies and local environmental policies. So I'd like to give you guys a moment to write in the chat on simple actions that you guys can take. I made an emphasis on showing what young leaders are doing because we're trying to make sure that we're trying to empower our future leaders of the county. But take a moment, write some messages in the chat, talk about some initiatives that, or some things that we as individuals can do to help support the creation of a future that we want to live in.
And Paul, as they're doing that and considering their answers, I just want to make a point about what's on the right side of the slide there. That is a resource that the UN published a couple of years ago called The Lazy Person's Guide to Saving the World. And when it comes to individual action, they have essentially removed any excuses and any obstacles for individuals doing something. And there's one section of that resource that actually says, actions for the couch potato. So even if you don't particularly want to get very involved, there are very simple things you can do all the way up to mobilizing peaceful campaigns.
Understood. I think kind of jumped it. I was going to get into that for the next slide because it kind of goes, we have a little bit of a lazy action that people can do. So it looks good. Dan, would you want to help me with reading at some of the comments? I could read off a couple of them. From Marsha, it's welcome refugees, improve stewardship. Wow, these are coming in pretty fastly. My scroll bar is like jumping off.
Yeah, an interesting one. Don't turn away from news stories that are difficult.
Yep. Connecting with local schools and provide presentation resources and tools that help educate youth on the issues you are advocating for. Yep. So then we have host underserved children during the summer, hold dinners with diverse populations, teach children about charitable giving, discuss implicit bias with children.
And Paul, a
He's
really
al-
important one from Dr. Caton on our board.
Okay.
Do your research about your elected officials before you vote for them so that your vote is informed.
That's very, very correct. So I taking a step. Yep. Okay.
Mr. M, use sports to bring people together. That's a major push from UNESCO, one of the agencies of the United Nations, because there's so many knock-on effects, positive effects that you get from engaging kids in sports.
A great one from Nicole. Collaborate to find internship and job opportunities for children and those who have lost their jobs due to COVID-19. That's very good. So I guess we already touched upon a lazy person guide to saving the world, and there's lots of simple things that we can do. We'll be sharing the messages that are shared with us in the chat with you later on. So we're just gonna give you guys a moment. As if you're keeping up with current events, you know that there are actions being taken to help remove our support from the World Health Organization. So this is an opportunity for all of you to pull out your phones, text pandemic to the number listed above, 738-674. Text the pandemic, and then you'll be connected to a list of steps that you can do to help support the advocacy on Congress to help helping our support of the World Health Organization. And this is something that we all simply can do. Just want to give you guys a moment, give you a little bit of time. We want to make sure this gets done. It's really important that we support the World Health Organization for not only intranational things occurring in America for education, but also the international engagement for the communities that do not have access to the primary care physicians and the emergency treatments that other communities may have access to. All right, so I'll take this moment to give the floor back to Troy.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for participating in that and texting. As you reflect on the experience from today, we hope that you are inspired by the work of the United Nations, the global goals, and the desire to make the world a better place. We hope that you realize how important your voice and opinions are to shaping the future that we want. The United Nations Association of the United States of America is committed to that future, and our growing network of Americans who come together to support the ideals and principles of the United Nations is proof of that commitment. We invite you to join us, to lend your talents, your voice, and expertise to a great cause. To learn more about our movement, please visit unausa.org. In addition, you may also, next slide please. You may also reach out to us through the emails on your screen to continue the dialogue and bring newfound perspectives to the conversation. At this point, I'd like to again turn the floor over to Peter Yo to provide summative remarks. Peter?
Great. Well, thank you all. Let me first of all thank the facilitators who walked us through today's consultation. They did an excellent job of really bringing together a substantive, thoughtful discussion about the world we want today and in the future. And I'm so impressed by the energy and creativity that you all brought to the discussion. You know, from Westchester, or Bronx, other parts of New York, Connecticut, other states globally, your answers to the questions were incredibly detailed and thoughtful, and really demonstrate sort of the breadth and the depth of not only the passion that you're bringing to these issues, but your expertise. It was great to hear from Westchester County Executive George Latimer, congratulating the UN on the 75th anniversary. It was wonderful to hear from Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Eliot Engel, who made the argument that the UN is the critical instrument to address global challenges, and that it's always best to partner with other countries than to go it alone. He made a specific point to saying that pulling out of the WHO would be a catastrophic mistake, and we certainly agree with him on that front. When we walk through the questions and, the words that people want, aspirational, compromise, the UN is necessary. We support it. UN promotes solidarity. We voted on areas that we had what were our top areas of concern. We focused on 3 global trends that will affect the future the most, and climate change, of course, led the pack, access to healthcare, poverty, and inequality. Great suggestions about what people would advise the Secretary General and member states to do. I love the one, embrace technology, bring young people into positions of power, focus on peacekeeping. Then there's a lot of really thoughtful discussions about what we need to do to bridge the gap from where we are now and where we need to be to actually achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And the one I just loved was stay and try to find solutions. And that gets to this issue of, can we make sure that when we work in large organizations like the UN, if things aren't going our way, do we walk away or do we stay in and fight to try to make things happen? And I think that's really important advice. So again, my appreciation to the chapter for organizing this consultation, great appreciation to the facilitators who did a top-notch job of bringing out the best in what was being laid on the table today. Really thank you all for participating. I learned a lot. We're going to take the results of this consultation, bring them together with the consultations in all 50 states, as well as some thematic consultations that we're doing nationwide. We're going to make sure that your elected officials, the Secretary General, and other key players see them and that they are appreciated at the global stage. So again, thank you very much. And Troy, back to you.
Thank you again, Peter. Congressman Engel, Marcia, the facilitators, our technical support team, and all of you who joined us today and participated in this UN75 consultation. We invite you to join us now during the next hour for our annual meeting, where you can learn more about the significant work of UNA USA. To officially end the consultation, we close out with a wonderful video on the founding of the United Nations at Muir Woods, provided by another great UNA USA chapter in Marin County, California. Enjoy the video. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the other side of the annual meeting.
Today, in the very heart of Muir Woods National Monument, a bronze plaque quietly reminds visitors that an event of international significance took place here amid the profound silence and serenity of the ancient redwoods as World War II was coming to an end. But 75 years ago, the world was at war, our nation mourning the loss of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The recently sworn-in President Truman's first decision was to proceed with the San Francisco Peace Conference. And so, on April 25th, 1945, 268 delegates representing 46 nations gathered in San Francisco to open the first session of the United Nations Conference. The atmosphere was solemn. The delegates worked hard on difficult issues. On May 19th, they took time off to honor the memory of FDR, a lover of trees, with a walk and ceremony among the peaceful, timeless redwoods of Muir Woods.